Hey, so first I want to introduce myself. I'm Samin, general manager of the Brooklyn Aces, but more importantly, just a huge fan of pro pickleball. I've been fortunate to work in sports for most of my career, including some time at the NBA. And honestly, what I love about many of those top leagues like the NBA and the NFL and international soccer is that they have incredible content that really dives into what the impact of the sport is and the storylines that shape it. So my goal here is to accomplish that for Major League Pickleball, and we're launching with this podcast, our pilot episode and first one, MLP Unpacked, with the goal being to give the fans exclusive access to the minds that are shaping the game. And the goal is to keep it insightful and informative. No hot takes here, at least for now. We'll have a number of guests from GMs to team owners and even fans, but the one thing we won't have is players. We already have enough pickleball player podcasts. So, with that, let me introduce our first guest for today, Ryan Harwood, general manager and owner of the New Jersey Fives. What's up, Ryan?
What's up, Samin? I'm excited to do this. Thanks for inviting me.
I feel like you got to share with everyone just the feeling you had on Monday going back into the office after an electric weekend in Salt Lake City, Utah.
You know, it's funny. I tweeted this out, and I don't tweet a lot, but I felt compelled to do it. Every single time I leave a Major League Pickleball weekend, it's like you get immersed and sucked into this different world of energy and just excitement to the point where it feels like you're living two entirely different lives. So it's such an incredible feeling to care and be passionate about something and feel like you're building something, and clearly your emotions run wild in a way that is it's very cool. I probably haven't had that since maybe college tennis, and I feel like it's very similar, and I'm living vicariously through the players and through the competitive juices that get flowing. So heading back to the office is always very weird because you kind of need to put those emotions aside and kind of like go back to more of the even keeled competitive spirit of business.
Yeah, I mean that's what makes sports great, and like that, I was pumped for a few reasons to do this first episode of MLP Unpacked with you. The first is we both won our respective midseason tournament
Let's
brackets. Like, got to shout that out where we can. But more importantly, I think you and I are both huge fans of some of the other top leagues in the world, right? You've got the NBA and the NFL, and what I'm starting to see more and more is just how much it feels like MLP in some ways replicates, in some ways is a better job of what some of those sports, are doing for their respective fans. Like, I think about what I see with you guys and the Fives and the audience that you're building, or the culture. I talked to Rich and Kevin about trying to institute that like San Antonio Spurs, Miami Heat culture for our team, and that is real and is like a goal. So I'm excited to try and make this as easy to understand for fans that are new to the sport, but also give them a little bit of a look to kind of what's going on behind the scenes and provide some, insightful opinions. So let's start with the standings. I mean, it's awesome. Like I've been following along, obviously really closely with our team, competing for a spot to go up into Premier. But looking at the Premier standings, I think it just so beautifully replicates what you see in other sports, where you're starting to get these tiers of teams that line up kind of well with the incentives at stake, whether it's a bye for the top two seeds or a playoff spot for teams 3 through 6, or everyone else that's kind of vying. So when I look at the standings, you've got the Flash, the Shock, the Ranchers, and yourselves that seem to be kind of establishing a top tier. And then from there, you've got the Hustlers, DC Pickleball Team, the LA Mad Drops, which is just an incredible Cinderella story that we'll have to get to in a second, kind of vying for those last two playoff spots. And then a group of teams, Carolina, the Drive, Columbus, the Squeeze, Utah, kind of rounding out the bottom there. And let's see if a team like that can make the move. But starting with that top group, I mean, you had all four playing in Utah. Ryan, I mean, look, I get it. You're the general manager of the Fives. You got to tout your team. But, like, what stood out to you amongst the Flash, the Shock, the Ranchers, and the Fives that you feel like has set those teams apart?
Yeah, I think what sets those teams apart right now, and I am going to say that it is still early. It is a long season, so
Sure.
I'm not yet prepared to say that that is the top tier for sure. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a second. But when I look at those teams, you have owners that and GMs and coaches that really, really care, that put a lot of time, energy, investment into their teams. You have players that are very passionate about the sport, they cheer for each other. They're good teammates. They're excited. They have a lot of strategy in how they're playing each match and doing matchups. So, now we have a small taste of what it's like for the big sports leagues, NBA, NFL, NHL. They need to pace themselves, not get too high or too low based on the results of each weekend. Health and availability is a big part of sports that have regular seasons like we have now. And you have to hope to remain healthy and durable as a team. And most importantly, peak at the right time as you enter the playoffs. So getting too hot early could be a detriment, as some teams may not like playing as the favorites and prefer being underdogs. I mean, that certainly worked in our favor at Grand Rapids. I think a lot of people thought we were underdogs against the Flash, against DC, and that worked in our favor. So this is the first time we've seen a season this long in MLP where chemistry and the culture of teams will matter more so than the past, when you just had to string it together a few weekends. And I think the true colors will show over time of those that are real leaders and really good teammates. So I don't think you can anoint a top tier quite yet. We've seen flashes of brilliance from those teams at different times, but a lot of it is matchups too. Some teams bother some more than others. So where you land in the playoff bracket may play a real role in the outcome at the end of the year as well. But one thing is for sure, it's going to be a boatload of fun, and the pressure is going to continue to mount as the season goes on.
There's something you said there that I have used a lot for our team, which is you have to peak at the right time. And I always come back to like thinking about the Kansas City Chiefs, for example, right? They were the 3 or 4 seed in the NFL playoffs last year. I think they were, 11-6, if I recall correctly, in the regular season, and then just got hot in the playoffs, right? And obviously went on to win the Super Bowl and had an incredible run, kind of beating up on teams on the way there. And so I've thought about that analogy a lot, which is like, yeah, you can get a team like, what was it, the Giants last year, where 6-0 and then went, I don't know, 1-8 or something like that the rest of the way. Like there are those moments where just because you may look good, we're about exactly halfway through the season now. In this first half, the standings could look completely different. We've seen, there's some top players in that bottom group there that could turn it on and completely flip the script on what teams are currently in the playoff picture. But there's really 2 teams I want to kind of hone in on, outside of obviously the Fives. But I do think the Shock and the Flash seem to be budding rivalry a little bit with the youth at play. They played each other in Kansas City, or excuse me, in Salt Lake, and they're playing each other again in Kansas City. Yeah. And the Flash kind of handled the Shock, like no real issues there. If you were putting on your St. Louis Shock GM hat for a second, what would you flip?
Oof, I thought we weren't doing hot takes. No
hot takes. No hot takes. But it's just interesting. I mean, it's just like those are the things that I feel like we're starting to see that again, like just mimic so much of what you see in other sports.
Yeah. Totally. Listen, as someone that is like competing with both of these teams, I don't want to give away too much of my thoughts on the individual players and the strategy of how I would approach that. But I think at the end of the day, the reason why the Shock has struggled a bit with the Flash is because the Shock rely a lot on their men's fast hands and their men's ability to take over court in mixed. And obviously, J Dub has probably the fastest hands in the game, and he can counter that very nicely. And Augie also has really good hands and resets, and is incredibly patient and can wait for some errors from the Shock team. So I think I think the Shock has done well countering some of the power and strength from. I'm sorry, the Flash has done well countering some of the power and strength of the Shock team. But listen, I think everyone makes adjustments. They watch tape, they watch film, they see what didn't work, and I honestly believe every single time some of those top teams go out against each other, it really is anyone's game. I mean, look at what happened when we played the Shock. I mean, we were up 24-20 in the first women's match, and there was the freeze, and we ended up losing that women's match, and then we ended up losing 3-1. Whereas if we win that women's match, which I think we're favored in, we go to a dream breaker, and who knows what happens. I think we have a
Yeah.
very good free dream breaker team, and that flips the script entirely from 3-1 to potentially a win for us. So like, it is a game of inches,
Yeah.
especially with the freeze back in play. It is a game of inches, and I really don't think I wouldn't count any of those teams out in a matchup when it comes to the end of the year.
I think it's such a good observation because what I do feel like we hear a lot from fans is the margins are so thin in MLP, right? The scoring is tight. The freeze introduces another element of sort of tightness that and variability that comes into our sport, and that is really what, in some ways, you see with the other most dramatic sports in the world, right? International soccer. I mean, any team can beat anyone. You see these teams from the fourth division of English football going and making a run in the FA Cup and taking down the Man Uniteds of the world. Like, the margins are so thin, and I think what's amazing about MLP is we're seeing that in our sport as well. And kind of like layering onto that, we talk a lot about talent pool and everything. I think the LA Mad Drop story is awesome. I mean,
Yeah.
Blaine Hovenier, I can't say I know the guy personally at all, but all the best wishes to Thomas Wilson, and hopefully he comes back, soon and healthy, most importantly. But that to me is like the quintessential Cinderella story.
Yeah.
They had a rough sort of go of it the first event in Atlanta, and then they were off for DC. They had a rough midseason tournament, and they're coming. I mean, you're coming into this event like we're about to play 6 games, season's on the line, and they went
Yeah.
4-2, and to put themselves right on the threshold of
Playoff.
a playoff spot. I mean, I don't know how much you got a chance to really watch them, but I'm curious if there was something you observed on the ground there with their vibe and how they kind of approach their games and their weekend.
I did actually. I try to be pretty observant and see what's going on around me at all times. Um, First of all, I don't know Blaine at all. I hadn't heard of him before he got picked up, to be frank. Massive kudos to the kid. I mean, he was the loudest and most positive guy on their team. I was watching from the sidelines. He was cheering on so much louder than anyone else in a lot of his matches. He gets pumped up. I mean, I watched him in the Dreambreaker versus Columbus. He's like pumping his fists after every singles point as if it's like tennis, just getting fired up. I mean, I loved it. I mean, he seems like a great pickup for them. Obviously, Catherine and Jade are already a really strong women's team. They were always a strong women's team. So Hunter got to spend a little time with him. Seems like a great guy. Seems like he's very positive. He likes to win as well. Obviously, an incredible singles player. So I like it. I like the chemistry of that makeup. They seem to be very positive, those four together, and it'll be really interesting to see what happens for the rest of the season for that group.
Yeah, that's a team I'm keeping my eye on, and just an incredible story, and one that I hope we continue to see have some success and really vie for one of those playoff spots as the season progresses.
Yeah.
So let's move, really kind of looking at the season overall. I've been thinking a lot about like how to best explain what this format, that we've kind of evolved to in 2024 means both to fans, but for the sport as a whole. And I kept coming back to To me, this is the most difficult trophy in pro pickleball, period. Because last year and years before, you've had these teams that have gone on to win MLPs. Incredible job. They won a weekend. They really brought it for 3, 4 days, whatever it might mean. But that just, in my mind, doesn't compare to a lot of what we talked about at the beginning, which is, can you put it together for a full season? Can you get through the highs and the lows of what playing and competing together for 7 or 8 months may take? And the reality of it is, there's just one of these trophies getting handed out at the end of the year to premier teams, and there's just one of these getting handed out to challenger teams. And I think you're going to see a lot more emotion in the playoffs. Like, we didn't really see a lot of you know people being upset if they lost a final of an MLP San Clemente in 2023, but I think that's going to look different this year. And something I'm kind of curious about from your perspective is, what does this mean for a player's legacy, and how do you think, especially from what you've heard on players on your team, they view winning this trophy?
Yeah. So first of all, I wholeheartedly agree that this is the most challenging MLP to win of them all by a long shot. In the past, you said it, you had to get hot for a weekend. You got lucky on who was in your pool that weekend. You make it out, you win a few matches. This sustained long-term season is the most difficult trophy to win in pickleball. I agree. I think it will mean a lot to a team's legacy. It's clear it will affect a player's legacy, but it's unclear what exactly it will do to an individual player's legacy in my mind. There's a lot that goes into whether a team wins or not, and it's not just on any one player. They're new partnerships. How did your GM draft the team? Matches that you can't affect because you're on the sidelines, you're not playing in them. Whether your owners and GMs are involved in helping you set you up for success. Is your coach adding value? Does your team even have a coach? So I think it certainly matters for players' legacies. It can really enhance it and put a player on the map. Even in the old one weekend only MLPs, you had players that would shine, and all of a sudden they were seen as a better player, even if they were underperforming in some of the PPAs. Their reputation was, they were puffing their chest out for a few weeks there. So it allows you to showcase, an MLP, it allows you to showcase your skill sets in a different way as an individual player, where you don't have to run into J-Dub and Dylan in the second round every time, or Annalie and Catherine every single quarterfinal. So I think to win the new season-long MLP trophy, it shows a few things about a player. It shows the player's adaptable. It shows you can win with many different partners. It shows you're very mentally tough and you're a durable, fit player, and likely a good teammate that works well with others. But it also likely shows you have a team around you that is passionate and involved. And if you look at that top tier of franchises that are atop the standings in Premier, all of those organizations are heavily involved and passionate about winning. They invest in their team and they really care about their players. So I think the coolest part about the season-long trophy is we're going to start to establish who are the Lakers and Celtics of Major League Pickleball. Who's going to accumulate banners year over year and establish themselves as the standard in this sport.
I love that. I mean, I couldn't agree more. I talk about that a lot internally of I'm not here to build, the franchise that's got one banner. You want to be the Lakers and Celtics. You want to be Real Madrid and Barcelona, right? You want to just sort of be the teams that, are looked to as sort of the standards of the sport. I also think from a player legacy standpoint, to me, this is row one in the sort of legacy column visual that we see, right? In the NFL, you've got Super Bowls, passing yards, passing touchdowns, MVPs, maybe division championships, and you've got Peyton Manning next to Tom Brady, right? And we've all seen that graphic hundreds of times, and you kind of have the legacy debate there. To me, this trophy is row one above anything else that I feel like an athlete can accomplish, mainly because it, to your point, showcases more than just your ability to hit shots on a court, right? Are you can you be a good teammate? Can you adapt to the team that's around you, right? If Tom Brady's got Randy Moss, he may be throwing more deep balls, but if he's got only Julian Edelman and Danny Amendola, he's completely adapting his game to fit the people around him. So
Yeah.
I think that's what makes me most excited about this year and this trophy is it's so only four players in Premier and four in Challenger are going to win this trophy, and that's it. And there aren't any more getting handed out. And hopefully we'll be able to do that year over year over year, and really talk about how this is the most difficult trophy in pro pickleball.
And just to finish that thought, it's funny because I have this debate with some of the other owners and some of the GMs, and a lot of them were like, I don't love the season long thing because there used to be an excitement to each weekend where you had a winner, but like now that we're like 2 or 3 weekends in, I actually disagree, and I think it's actually really cool to have a season long outcome and something that needs to be sustained. I mean, it's a mental grind, and you have to get yourself up for every single match, even though there's not something on the line for every single match. So I think this is going to prove out to be the right format for showing who the best team really is.
Yeah, and just one last add to that. We haven't even gotten to the best part yet, right?
Yeah.
I mean, like wait until these last few events, MLP Vegas, MLP Miami, where you're vying and jockeying for playoff position, right? You've got the Mad Drops in the 7th seed and DC in the 6th seed, and the winner clinches a playoff. So, I mean, I think we're going to have those scenarios. And, like, you want to talk about intense drama.
Yeah.
That, I think, will supersede anything that we saw in MLPs of past. Like, it's going to be incredible.
100%. And to that point, big shout out coming up. We've got MLP New York. We've got MLP Miami. I think those are going to be two of the biggest MLP events to put us on the map in a whole different way. Lots of decision makers when it comes to sponsors and media rights deals. And I think those are going to be two of the biggest that we've ever had. We've never had them in major cities like New York and Miami before like that. Even, San Clemente, while it's close to LA, it's not LA. So, everyone that's listening to this, if you care about MLP at all, make a concerted effort to make those two some of the best MLPs we've ever seen.
Oh, yeah. I know. I mean, you and I, both of our respective teams are scheduled to be at each of those, and those are going to be two of the highest stakes events, right? Just given the fact that they're towards the end of the season. And really speaking of stakes, the last thing I really wanted to touch on, all the love and respect in the world to Premier and their teams and their players. I love watching it, but to just show a little love to Challenger for a second with where, the Brooklyn Aces are, I think from a what's at stake for your team and your franchise, I'm not sure there's even, there's an argument to be made that there's more at stake for a Challenger team than even a Premier team and getting a chance to win the trophy, given the fact that Premier teams ponied up almost $1 million to start at that level. So I'm kind of curious, not that I'm sure you've watched a ton at the Challenger level, but what have you seen that kind of stands out to you in terms of what Challenger teams are doing to try and set themselves up to be in the top 4 and get promoted up to Premier?
Yeah. Challenger is fun, man. I mean, I don't envy the job of the Challenger GMs. I don't envy your job. It is more of a chess game, a constant chess game than it is for Premier right now, because it's very difficult. There are way more slight tweaks and player personnel decisions that can dramatically change the outcome of your team's results in Challenger. Whether it's a player who didn't get drafted or it's a player who's rapidly emerging on one of the tours that a GM spotted a week before another. I mean, let's talk about this for a second. Let's talk about that Kwang Dong wasn't drafted at all. He wasn't drafted, yet here he is performing incredibly well in Premier. If someone in Challenger would have grabbed him, it could have been a game changer. So, Premier is a bit different because for the most part, you have this established crop of players that are seen as, the top 24 men, 24 women, whatever it is. Sure, there are some drops and trades that have affected these teams, but it's much more likely for someone to go from the 65th best male in the world that hasn't gotten drafted to the 40th best male that squarely belongs in Challenger in a matter of months.
Yeah.
Than it is to go from like the 40th to the 15th best male in the world and break through into premier. So those rapid ascensions to break through to top whatever it is, 45 men in the world are occurring on a daily basis, I feel like. And also the main difference between the two, I think, is the premier teams are right now are trying to build fan bases and continuity with their players, familiarity with the their game styles as teammates, comfort on what your partner may do in certain situations, building storylines. Fans are now used to seeing Anna Leigh in a Fives jersey. She wore it last year, and she's going to be wearing it for years to come. So that's like Kobe in the Lakers. Like that yellow and gold jersey with Kobe becomes synonymous. And that's going to matter in building the value of these franchises and for what the future holds for MLP and the team format of pickleball. You also may take, I think this is in both instances, Challenger and Premier, but you also may take a flyer on someone with a ton of upside. A lot of people criticized us for taking both Will and Mari as unknowns, inexperienced, when there were a lot of known commodities on the board still left. And we felt it was worth the gamble because if they worked out and continued to get better, worked on their games every day, we were investing in the future as well, not just the present. And I think you guys did that with Lane as well.
Yeah. I mean, Lane had picked up a paddle in February or March. We drafted her in April and she was on a court playing in May. I mean, it was insane. And it's your point about the differences between the two. Like, it's a freaking dogfight in Challenger. I mean, you're just every week, something could change. A player could get better. And you're just looking up, trying to make it into that top four and give yourself a chance to move up into Premier, where I think we all obviously know we want to be. And it really messes with your mind because there's this sort of level of instability and the outcomes that could come up where it's I could make it into Premier and I've set out to accomplish that and I've achieved my goal, or I'm back in Challenger for 2025 and I'm grinding it out again for another year, looking up at those teams who are able to build around Anna Leigh or invest in a Will or Mari Humberg. So you can see this level of impatience almost inserting themselves into the minds and the spines of Challenger GMs and team owners because it's just a freaking dogfight down here trying to make it into the top four.
Totally. When I saw that you got Pablo, I was like, that's huge for you guys. Pablo's an amazing player. And then I started seeing everybody pick up some of the players that weren't drafted, like the Bravermans and Fudges. I'm like, wow, there's a lot of changes going on here. And those are dramatic changes that really are going to affect the rest of the season. So like I said, I don't envy the job of a GM in the Challenger League because I actually think it's more challenging than the Premier GMs right now.
Yeah, and it's only I think going to get more and more rough in some ways because you're going to start to see, all right, who's got a real chance of being a top 2 seed in Challenger and kind of having a bye to the semis and basically guaranteeing yourself a spot up in Premier, who's in 3 through 6. I mean, those 3 through 6 playoff matchups, that first round. So for fans that don't know, well, the teams that are, in the standings 3 through 6 will play each other in the first round of the playoffs, kind of like a sort of wild card round like exists in other leagues. And for Premier, that's incredible. You have a chance if you win your series to move on to the semifinals and have a chance to hoist the trophy at the end of the year. For Challenger, that first round of the playoffs with teams 3, 4, 5, and 6 are basically competing for a spot in Premier.
Yeah.
Like you are playing another team and one of the two of you is going up, and that's what that series means. I mean, it's going to be amazing.
So, I mean, for the audience, because even I don't know this. Like for 3, 4, 5, 6 playoffs, is it single elimination? Meaning like you go to Dallas, you play one match and one match only, and if you win, you go on to Orlando. If you lose, you're out.
Great question. It's a best of 3 series, actually. So modeling off of, Major League Baseball and the NBA and others who do series, you will play your opponent in a best of 3 series. And I actually think we're going to get a handful of game 3s. And if a game 3 goes to a dream breaker, I mean, can you imagine? It's going to be insane. And But it's exactly what you said. You're playing that first round in Dallas, sort of the wild card round, let's call it for our playoffs with the chance to move on to the semis and eventually the finals, either in Orlando or in, keeping some of those in Dallas as well. But yeah, it's a best of 3 series. You go down 0-1, your back's against the wall. Let's see what your team is made of.
And do you play the first game one day, the second game the next day, and the third day a third day potentially?
That's the vision. Yeah. We'll see, once we finalize this schedule. I would love for it to be that. Think game 1 on Friday, game 2 Saturday, game 3 if needed on Sunday, and Sunday just turns into, I mean, probably one of the most dramatic moments in MLP history, with teams sort of battling it out in that tiebreaker match to move on to the next round of the playoffs.
I know the semis and finals also best of 3.
Yeah, all of them, best of 3 series. So I mean, Ryan, I know you're a huge Knicks fan. I grew up in Dallas. I'm a big Mavericks fan. We hear this on the broadcast a lot, right? Where it's one thing to play a team during the regular season. Maybe you don't like someone, but you move on. You're able to sort of get past it. When you play a series, like the level of call it frustration that opponents have with each other just increases exponentially game by game.
Oh my God. It's like Halliburton and Brunson, like 100%. It's the bad blood just builds and builds, and you get to know each other's games on a whole nother level.
Yeah. So I've got a lot of the regular season left. Obviously, big shout out to Kansas City and the teams that are playing there this upcoming weekend, followed by obviously New York, Virginia Beach, Vegas, Miami. I mean, we've got, 5 events left of our 8 in the regular season, but man, we're well on our way. And like, in my opinion, every event, the drama and just the level of what's at stake and the competition just seems to increase every time, which is incredible.
Totally. It's going to be an amazing second half of the season, and to see how this all unfolds. And, hopefully everyone brings it.
Yep. All right. Well, thanks everyone tuning in to the first episode of MLP Unpacked. Our goal is to, be back weekly, give everyone a little bit of a brain dump on what's going on in our league and behind the scenes. But shout out to everyone that listened to this first one. And Ryan, thank you for the time.
Thanks for having me.